And also, it's nice to see that there is quite some overlap maybe in the topic. So I think you did a good job in collecting different speakers in the same topic. So what I've been doing for the past few years is developing some prototypes and interfaces or research tools through an iterative design process. In order to investigate if we can see through the skin. Of course, there has been a lot of research done in the past, and I actually started out with some kind of really low resolution interface that looks a bit like the Margarita interface from the 60s, which was a really big chair with a lot of solenoids. I only had 9 solenoids, so it was like really low resolution version of that. So you could, in theory, display some images. There was a camera input, and it translated it to the movement of solenoids, which you could use on your hand or your back or your belly. And of course, with this low resolution version, you couldn't really distinguish shapes in the or like images or objects, but you could, like, for example, feel different movements or simple symbols or like really thick lines to follow some patterns. And the next version I made was to get rid of this this grid of 9 by 9 pixels. So I made the pixels actually in such a way that you could put it all over your body. You could connect it to your arms, to your legs, wherever you wanted. As an investigation to see how we could use this to as a tool for researchers and artists to explore and open up their field of research or art practice. I've been developing all these interfaces. Like, there was like a progression in it. The next one was like a more fixed one. There was one distance sensor and one vibration motor, and there was a few of these products which you could use on your arms or legs or whatever you wanted to navigate through a room. And I experimented a lot with it to see if you could distinguish different shapes or 3D shapes. I also made like kind of a glove where you could feel a virtual shape, so you could feel like there were vibration motors in a glove, and the closer you got to this shape, the more vibration, or it was fired when you touched it, so you could like try to feel virtual shapes. I also used an active torch, which is a like off-the-shelf product, but I made some different versions of that as well. But in the end, I realized that there is a big drawback in all these interfaces, and that it has they have like really low resolution. So maybe 1, 2, 5, or 9 pixels in my case, and I made a few more interfaces that are not on here. But it's really hard to have images that you can recognize. So if you want to have something that you can recognize shapes with, I just made a quick test, and at the bottom left you see the amount of pixels. So I'm increasing the amount of pixels every time, and I just have an object in front of my camera, and it takes like a lot of pixels. In this case, we're already at 500 and over before you recognize. Maybe you don't even recognize it yet, but before you recognize it's a pair of scissors, which illustrates that it's getting really complex really quickly. So in this case, you might need like 500 or 1,000 pixels in order to recognize shapes, which is, well, not the scope of my research. And of course, we know that the sensory motor contingency is important in order to learn these these stimuli. So there should be some kind of relationship. That's what we always think, or what we know, that there should be a relationship between the stimuli and the signals I perceive. So in the case of the first interface, there should be like a relationship between the camera input and the solenoid output, which is there because, well, if a pixel is black, then it's fired, and if it's white, it's not fired. So there is a relationship, but it's not really clear how this influences this relationship, how this influences the way we learn these patterns. So I thought if I think I have like 9 pixels or 9 vibration motors, how can I increase detail? So at the right you have 9 vibration motors in a row, and at the left it's the grid I had before. And if you see it as like a bar, you could say, well, if I have a frequency, then a low frequency, like in the right hand side example, low frequency would be like 1 motor is vibrating, and the higher the frequency, the more motors will vibrate. And then there is a relationship between the frequency and the pattern that is presented to you. But at the left-hand side, I can make 512 different patterns with the same 9 vibration motors. But then there is no relationship between the signal and the pattern, since the left-hand side it's a bit patterns. So I can make 512 different patterns, but they don't have any relationship with what's coming in, like sound or image or whatever. And I couldn't really find out how this influences the way we learn these kind of patterns. So that's what I started doing, just to check how easy or how hard it is to learn these quite random patterns and connect them to, in this case, frequencies. And I use frequencies because it's easy to have like a pure frequency if you use like natural sounds, or if you use voice, and there are a lot of factors that make it really difficult. So I started out by using just pure frequencies, and I presented these frequencies in a vibration pattern on the back. And I'm just learning how to recognize these frequencies. So how did I do that? I first made like the interface you see here. There was the first version with vibration motors in both in a straight line and in a grid. And I used the audio frequency, and in one research I presented this as a linear representation of this tactile symbol, and in another version I used a binary representation, and just checked how hard it was to guess what frequency was played to me. Afterwards, this has had some drawbacks. I made a new version with other motors and other a bit of a different orientation, and just easier to wear. So now it's a belt that I can put on my back and have these frequencies played back to me as a vibration pattern. So what I do is I have a sound. I have one sound every 2 seconds, like one frequency every 2 seconds. And of course, in this case, I also see it on the screen, but in the actual research, I don't see the pattern on the screen. So the only thing I have is I hear a frequency and I feel the pattern. And after 10 iterations, I don't hear any frequency, but I do hear a new pattern, and then I just type in what frequency I guess it is. And then it tells me, well, you were wrong, this was the frequency. And then I save it to a database and check how well I did. So I get something like this. I have the actual frequency that was played to me. Then I have the frequency that it actually was. So I can see how far off I was of these frequencies. So I can track the progress in how good I get in guessing what frequency it was. There are some minor difficulties, like how do you do this with frequencies? Now I use like steps of 200 hertz to step up to the next frequency. Yeah, and maybe we are more accustomed to other sounds, like maybe in like tones, like musical tones. I'm also experimenting to see if there are better ways to present these frequencies. In the end, the goal is, of course, not to have this in kind of controlled lab environment with frequencies, but to have it in a more situated context. And there have been some research has been done to see how this works in context with speech. For example, Scott Novich, who was presenting here last time, used this system with a vest and translates words into vibration patterns, and these vibration patterns are also really complex and way too complex to try to comprehend and try to figure out what kind of pattern it is. So you have to learn and just unconsciously connect all these patterns to words. So if we know how well we can do that, how well we can learn these patterns, if there's no relationship between the pattern and in this case the frequency, we know if we could use this system for other things. So in the future, I want to look for different situated applications, and maybe also to see if we can use this for a more subjective experiences, like maybe art or experiencing shape. So it's not necessarily meant to just be a sensory substitution device, but more like maybe also like a sensory augmentation device. So it might add just a different experience to experience a painting, for example, or music. Or now I'm in a phase that I'm just first want to try to find out how we learn these kind of patterns and how important the relationship between the pattern and the stimuli is. That was it for now. Thank you. And if there are any questions, feel free to ask them at the end, of course.